Welcome back to another edition of the Saturday to Sunday Football Podcast. I am Paul Perdichizzi, and thank you for joining me as always. Week 1 of the college football season is almost in the books. I am recording this Labor Day evening. The only game left on the docket is Bill Belichick's debut for the UNC Tar Heels against TCU, but so much has happened from week 0 to week 1 of the college football season. There has been a slew of games on Thursday, Friday, Saturday, 2 games yesterday on Sunday, and then we conclude tonight with that North Carolina TCU game. Regular season shows are all about the NFL draft report. We take a look at all the draft eligible prospects, go through some of the highs, the lows, the performances. When there's non-draft eligible prospects to talk about, we incorporate a Devy slant where I talk about a few prospects maybe from the Devy landscape that are not draft eligible that maybe I'm intrigued with, fascinated with, would be trying to get on my Devy teams with trades. And then once the NFL season kicks off, we always conclude all these in-season episodes with an NFL rookie report where we check in on the 2025 rookies, who I'm buying, who I'm selling, and then also a quick stock up, stock down dynasty fantasy report as well, where I'm talking about a few guys in terms of their dynasty value that are not the rookies that I'd be buying or selling. So most in-season podcasts have 4 parts to it: the NFL draft stock report, the Devy report slant, the NFL rookie report, and the dynasty report in terms of how things lay out this week. Obviously, the NFL hasn't kicked off yet. Not much in terms of the underclassmen that I want to make any sweeping declarations after 1 week. So tonight we're just going to focus on a little smaller of a podcast, just the biggest things that I saw from week 1 of the college football season in terms of the draft eligible prospects. So let's get right into it. And I think this is going to be a theme of almost every NFL draft report this year. And that is talking about the 2026 quarterback class, because the 2026 quarterback class is going to have so many interesting names that we really got to get into in terms of what we see. And I don't want to make sweeping declarations after 1 week. I think it's very easy to do that. You know, we saw this past week that Arch Manning really struggled. So let's start with Arch Manning. Obviously, that was the biggest game of the week 1 of college football season. It could arguably be one of the biggest games the entire season. I think Texas will rebound well, but Ohio State versus Texas, we had Arch Manning on the road, so many people's number 1 quarterback. Again, it is a traits-based analysis with Arch Manning right now. He has basically started 2 games, but the traits are there. Now, if somebody watched him this past weekend, they probably questioned that about whether or not the traits are there. I am not going to make any sweeping changes to rankings off of 1 poor game from Arch Manning against the defending national champions on the road. But it wasn't a good game for Arch Manning. You know, if you watch that game, 17 of 30, 170 yards, 1 touchdown, 1 interception. Accuracy and ball placement were really poor, even on short stuff. He had a couple nice plays here or there. You saw it on that one drive where they scored late to cut it to 7. You saw a couple really impressive throws from him. You saw the athleticism, which is an extra little facet that he has in his there, unlike his uncles. So he can move. We know he's got the arm talent, but this wasn't a good game. It just wasn't. And again, I think people are going to make these rash decisions off of 1 game. If they play in the playoffs, you know, fast forward 6 months from now, or, you know, whatever, 5 months from now, they play again in January, I think you'll see a very different performance from Arch Manning. I truly believe that. But yeah, this was not a good game. I didn't think Texas called a good offensive game plan. I think they didn't really cater to Arch's skill set. It took him a while to really start to get his mobility incorporated in this. The short game and the quick game, the limited that they did do, he was very inaccurate, but I did think they went away from it too much and they didn't really ever get him in a rhythm. I would have liked to see them maybe speed it up a little bit and maybe go a little bit no huddle or up tempo to see if that could have settled him in. So I thought there were definitely coaching aspects of it, but we're not going to beat around the bush. It was a really poor game from Arch Manning. The accuracy and the ball placement were very poor, and it wasn't a good first showing. I'm not going to start saying, oh, all of a sudden that means he can't be the first quarterback in 2026. That's ridiculous. That's insanity to think that off of one game. So that's the first thing. Second, let's take this to the matchup later that evening between Clemson and LSU. Two other quarterbacks very much in the top 10 mix potentially for the 2026 NFL draft. That's Garrett Nussmeier of LSU, Cade Klubnik out of Clemson. Nussmeier looked like exactly who he is. To me, he's a very steady quarterback. To me, he's going to profile as a better version of Mac Jones. I never liked Mac Jones. I thought he was more of a early 2 who got pushed into the mid-round 1. I think Garrett Nussmeier is more of like right now, his physical traits is more of like a mid-round 1 quarterback who's going to get pushed into the top 10. But Nussmeier is very smart in the quarterbacking aspect of it. The working progressions, the mental processing, the pocket awareness. You saw it this weekend, 28 of 38, 230 yards and 1 touchdown, leading LSU to that victory over Clemson. So Nussmeier, a good opening week performance. You saw the accuracy, you saw the ball placement. These are not high-end traits. Neither is the athleticism, but he's very steady. He's very advanced in terms of the quarterbacking aspects of it. So I think that's what's going to have him ahead of a lot of people's quarterback boards and rankings. For me, he was a little bit lower because right now I'm basing a lot on trait stuff. Lenora Sellers, Arch Manning, Fernando Mendoza. Like those are the guys I had ahead of him. Traits. So Nussmeier doesn't have high-end traits, but the cerebral aspect of it, he's very good at that right now, and we're going to see that throughout the whole year. It'll be interesting to see though where NFL teams kind of put that if some of these high-end traits players end up declaring for that draft. Cade Klubnik, I was very disappointed in, very much like Arch Manning, a very poor opening performance for a guy who's getting a lot of top 10, top 15 buzz. I think it was Dan Brugler said of some people, there is a pretty big wide gap on the ranges of Cade Klubnik in terms of his quarterbacking evaluation. Some people look at him as a round 3 or day 3 player. Other people have him as a top 10 talent. This week, 19 of 38, 230 yards and interception wasn't his best performance. So he struggled this week as well, very similar to Arch Manning. But I'm not going to take any. Let me just bring him in because he's the other guy in my top 5 or top 6. Fernando Mendoza and Lenora Sellers. Lenora Sellers led South Carolina to win 12 of 19, 209 yards, rushing touchdown. We saw the athleticism. We saw the big arm. There's still a lot of improvement in terms of the processing, the progressions, the pocket awareness from him, but he's got the physical traits. He led South Carolina to the win. I don't think Lenora Sellers did anything to change the narrative on who he is. High-end traits, still developing as a pure quarterback, but we saw that lead South Carolina to a victory. And then Fernando Mendoza versus Old Dominion, Indiana got the win, but Mendoza did not have a good game, especially against that level of defense. 18 of 31, 193 yards, no touchdowns, added 33 yards on the ground for 1 touchdown there. But Mendoza, poor game against Old Dominion, stands out. Cade Klubnik, poor game against LSU, high-end defense. Arch Manning, poor game against Ohio State's great defense. So 3 of my top 6 quarterback prospects all had really, really poor games. So I'm not going to sit here and be like, oh, they can't be round 1 prospects. That's it. They're not good enough. But it was a poor start for all 3 of those quarterbacks. It'll be interesting to see how they bounce back. I am not going to start changing my draft projections on any prospect right now off of 1 game. I'll start talking about things like that maybe by week 4. Then maybe somebody could emerge and have a great start to the year and they kind of put themselves on the map. But I'm not going to start making rash decisions on my draft projections off of 1 game to start the year for any of those 3 quarterbacks that I do think all have high-end traits in different aspects of it. But Manning, Klubnik, Mendoza, all very intriguing traits. Some other guys that really stood out from this past week, Drew Aller, 22 of 26, 217, 1 touchdown. Penn State rolled, not a tough competition there. So he's another guy right there in the mix in that top 6, top 7. A couple guys that I think really I had on that round 1, round 2 border did look really good this week, and that was John Mateer and Sam Levitt. Sam Levitt out of Arizona State, 25 of 39, 257 yards and 2 touchdowns. Also added 73 yards rushing and 2 touchdowns. And then John Mateer out of Oklahoma, 30 of 37, 392 yards and 3 touchdowns with a touchdown run as well. Both of those guys, really intriguing prospects. That those are 2 guys, and I talked about this on the quarterback show. So this is not changing my tune off of 1 good performance. I'm not going to change my opinion on somebody negatively, and I'm not going to change anything positively off of 1 game. but there was a reason why I had Levitt and Mateer as that late round 1, early round 2 draft projection right now. And they can move into round 1, they could fall. There's a lot of ways that can go, but I think the traits are there. I think they're both set up in really good schemes for their talents that I think Levitt and Mateer, you're going to see them each week putting up really good numbers, and that is potentially going to lead to some high-end production, keeping them on the radar, and those could be some guys that really emerge. So if Lenora Sellers goes back, if Arch Manning goes back, depending on who declares, who doesn't, I think these are two guys that could push their way very much into that top half of round 1 mix if they have the years that I think they can, based on their physical traits, based on their athleticism, the arm talent that they possess. And I think they're set up to be really successful seasons for both of them in terms of production, which is going to also put them at the spotlight a little bit more in this season. A couple other guys. Miller Moss is a guy I have an early day 3 grade on, making his debut for his new team this year. Louisville, 17 of 25, 253 yards and 1 touchdown. Very steady performance. He just looks like he portrays himself as his starting quarterback job, but he already looks like a high-end caliber backup quarterback at the NFL. I think that's eventually the trajectory we're on. I hope I'm wrong. I hope he proves to be a top 50 pick and becomes a starting quarterback. But if you fast forward a couple of years, I could see Miller Moss being a really good functional backup quarterback at the next level. Very nuanced player, very smart. You see it in his mental processing. You see it in the pocket awareness, working through progressions very quickly. Miller Moss does. Couple other guys that stood out this week. I mean, how can we not talk about Tommy Castellana out of Florida State? The big upset win for the Seminoles over Alabama, 31-17. He backed up his trash talking or his bravado, whatever you want to call it, from the preseason and leading up to the start of college football season. He goes out there, Gus Malzahn, one of the best offensive coordinators in terms of run game coordinators in college football. At his time at Auburn, now he's the one setting things up for that Florida State offense this year. And he really had Bama in all different sorts. 78 yards rushing on the ground, 9 of 14, very functional in the passing game, but very impressive week 1 performance from the Seminoles, led by their dual threat quarterback, who I think we're going to hear a lot from this year, because I think we're going to see some monster performances from him. If he was able to do that against Alabama week 1 of the season, when they start playing some inferior opponents, I think we might start seeing some 4 touchdown games from Tommy in terms of rushing and throwing. So for the transfer there, Seminoles got as good quarterback play as they've had in many, many years. We saw how up and down it was last year. Seminoles trying to get back on the winning ways this season after the dreadful 2-win season last year, and they're off to a big-time start with that win over Alabama. A couple other guys I want to talk about. Carson Beck led Miami to a big-time win over Notre Dame last night. 20 of 30, 205 yards and 2 touchdowns. Carson Beck, another one of those guys. I look at him, I see a lot of like what Kenny Pickett was when Kenny Pickett was in college. I do think the physical traits might be a little bit better for Carson Beck, but there was just so much inconsistency last year from him. If he can get back to being a more consistent player, I think he could push his way back into the top 50 mix. This was a guy that last year at this time was being looked at as potentially QB1 of the 2025 NFL draft. So impressive performance against a high-end caliber defense there for Notre Dame. So Beck looked really good. Interesting to kind of see if he can keep that going. Couple other quarterbacks. Sawyer Robertson out of Baylor, 419 yards and 3 touchdowns. He's another one of those guys I kind of got on that round 3, round 4 bubble right now. But I think with a strong year, he can maybe push his way into the top 50 mix, top 100 mix for sure, and lock it in. I thought he had a really strong performance in week 1 there for the Bears. And then Avery Johnson out of Kansas State. Now, he's played 2 weeks already because Kansas State played in week 0. Very inconsistent player. I think there's still a lot of development. He was on my watch list. 21 of 30, 273 yards and 2 touchdowns, and 28 of 43 for 318 3 touchdowns. So already 5 touchdowns from him. But again, you see those highs, you see those lows. Johnson needs to improve in terms of his overall consistency. You see some inconsistency in terms of the ball placement and the accuracy, some decision-making. That's what Johnson needs to clean up. And if he does that, I think we could be talking about him same way I'm talking about Sawyer Robertson as potentially a day 2 pick. Rocco Beck out of Iowa State. He was another guy who was on my watch list. I know David Syvertson over at Our Lads. He's been a guest here at Saturday Sunday multiple times. Is really high on Rocco Beck, and I didn't get a chance to do a deep dive before the season started, but right now he's the first quarterback already on my list. 2 games into the season, 3 touchdowns week 1, 2 touchdowns this week. 2 touchdowns week 1, 3 touchdowns this week. 183 yards this past week, 19 of 20, 278 yards, very surgical in his performance. But Rocco Becht is, I think, the quarterback that nobody's talking about that quickly could start getting some top 100 type buzz as a potential day 2 quarterback prospect for the 2026 NFL draft. And then the last one, kind of a very uneasy performance. Nico Amalavea, now of UCLA, former of Tennessee. Nico was 11 of 22, 136 yards and 1 touchdown. Utah had UCLA all confused, and Nico really struggled in this one. So again, first game, not going to make any rash changes to my rankings or decisions, but Nico looked very uneasy. Arch looked very uneasy. Mendoza looked uneasy. Cade Klubnik looked uneasy. A couple other guys, status quo. A couple other guys looked even better than I thought in John Mateer and Sam Levitt. But again, just week 1, got to take that into perspective and understand it's going to be a roller coaster. We do this every year, the ups and the downs. So I'll talk about these guys. I'll check in with these guys, but you're not going to see me make drastic changes to my rankings. You're not going to see me make drastic changes to my draft projections. Yeah, 4 weeks into the year, you might start hearing me say this guy's now looking more of like a day 2 player instead of a round 1. This guy has emerged from a day 2 now to round 1. This guy's more of a day 3 right now. But I need to see 4 or 5 games before I really start making a very dramatic movement in terms of my rankings and my projections on these players in the scouting notebook as well. Let's take this to the running backs. Not a lot stood out from week 1 of the college football season in terms of the running backs that I was, kind of looking. I keep coming back to it. This is a very, very down year and dramatically down compared to what we just saw this past year. The best running back in the country, Jeremiah Love, could not get anything going for Notre Dame last night against Clemson. 10 carries, 33 yards. They did not feed him a lot, so I don't know if there was some type of injury going on there or what, but Jeremiah Love needs to be a guy who gets 25 touches in some capacity on most weeks for that Notre Dame offense to be effective, and 10 is just not going to cut it, and that was a pretty close game throughout, so I'm not sure what that was all about. Jonah Coleman out of Washington, 24 carries, 177 yards and 2 touchdowns. I had him as an early day 3 grade, physical back. You saw that physicality, the toughness, the play strength, running people over. But when he gets to the second level of defense, he could use that power and that short area quickness and burst to pick up chunk yards as well. So impressive opening performance from Jonah Coleman. Justice Hayes of Michigan, 159 yards and 2 touchdowns. Michigan rolled. Interested to see how Michigan looks this year. Another year removed from Jim Harbaugh and everything that went on with Michigan last year. But early first week, Justice Hayes, very impressive performance, 159 yards and 2 touchdowns. And then Darius Taylor out of Minnesota. He's in my rankings as another early day 3 prospect. 141 yards, chipped in 4 catches for 36 yards as well. I would say from a lot of my running backs that were high in my rankings, they just didn't get much work this week. Nick Singleton didn't have to do much for Penn State. Damon Claiborne, put up a very lackluster performance for Wake Forest. Jayden Ott only got 1 carry for Oklahoma. So that might have to be one of my first things I consider about moving him down my rankings. If he's not going to be there, at least a 50-50 back in terms of touches in that backfield. CJ Baxter out of Texas, lost more work to Quintravion Wisner than I expected. Right now I have Baxter at 5 and Quintravion Wisner at 10. We'll see if it's a little bit closer. We'll see if Baxter gets a little bit more moving forward, but none of those guys looked good this week against Ohio State. A couple lanes opened up for Quintravion Wisner, so he put up the better statistical performance, but nothing that really stood out as that Texas offense obviously struggled against Ohio State. Bryson Washington for Baylor didn't do much this past week. Le'Veon Moss only had a couple carries for Texas A&M. A lot of very lackluster performances from the 2026 running backs. I think that will change. But remember what I said in the running back preview show before the season started. This is as weak a running back class as I can remember. I do not expect a lot of these underclassmen running backs to declare. Maybe they see it as an opportunity because there's not a lot of high-end talent that maybe they can push their way up the board. But I don't think the league is going to do that. I think if the league doesn't view these guys, they're just going to let most of them fall to like day 3. And then at that point, it's probably worth it to go back, get the NIL money, try to improve your draft stocks, so you can get into the day 2 range. but I just don't think there's a lot of high-end prospects right now at the running back position. So when I check in on these running backs, it's going to be interesting to see if anybody emerges who wasn't a part of my scouting reports in the preseason. And then if any of these guys, can move up rankings, because I do think there's going to be a lot of ups and downs from this running back class in terms of my guys I have ranked, and we're going to see a lot of movement in those rankings for sure. If we take this to the pass catchers, let's start with the only tight end I want to talk about, and that's Michael Trigg out of Baylor. 7 catches, 99 yards, and 1 touchdown. That stands out as a tight end. I had him a little bit further down my ranks. I didn't see the athletic profile that I thought was going to warrant a high-level production. But watching the game the other day, he looked a little bit quicker. So I don't know if he's going to be a guy that just like play speed. He looked a little bit quicker. When I saw him the other day, he looked faster than I thought he looked on film last year. So maybe he dropped a little weight. He looked a little bit quicker laterally, which I thought that was an area of concern. I thought he had some maybe like straight line, short area bursts, but not a lot of movement skills in terms of left to right. But he looked really good the other day. We already know he can get up and get it. His ball skills, body control, the ability to high point. We already knew he had that. I just questioned whether or not he had the athleticism to really be a weapon in terms of the pass game at the next level. So far, week 1 was an impressive performance from him. No other tight ends really stood out from this past week. And let's talk about some wide receivers of note. First one that came to mind is Nick Harbor out of South Carolina. 3 catches, 99 yards, and 1 touchdown. I think Nick Harbor is one of the more interesting wide receiver prospects for the 2026 NFL draft. I talked about him in my wide receiver show before the season started. I had a round 3, round 4 grade on him, but I said he's not going to go round 3 or round 4 because this is what's going to happen. Either he's going to have a breakout year, and then he's going to test like a freak because he is a size, speed freak in terms of the size, the frame, and how fast he can run. He's going to blow the combine up. And if he does all that, good year, blows the combine up, he's going to be a top 50 pick in the NFL draft, and you're going to hear a lot of comps to DK Metcalf. If he continues to not show a good understanding of route concepts and to show inconsistency and then drops become an issue, well, then I think he's going to go back to school, and he's not going to be a round 3, round 4 prospect for a 2026 NFL draft. So to me, Harvard's either staying in school because his stock's not good, or if he has a good year, his stock's going to pivot, going to rise all the way into the top 50, and he's going to be one of the best wide receiver prospects in the 2026 NFL draft. I don't see a middle ground for him to be a round 3, round 4 prospect, because I think either he explodes and becomes a round 1, early round 2, or he goes back to school. Other wide receivers that stood out from this past week, Denzel Boston for Washington, 5 catches, 92 yards, and a touchdown. He sits inside my top 7, 8 wide receivers for a 2026 NFL draft. You love the body control, the ball skills, the ability to adjust and high point. Those are Boston's calling cards. The number 1 wide receiver in the country is Jordan Tyson. He did not disappoint in his week 1 performance. 12 catches, 141 yards, and 2 touchdowns. I kind of feel like Jordan Tyson is going to put up like a Tet McMillan type season from 2 years ago where he just dominates everything. I think that's what we're kind of seeing. Jordan Tyson, he can win at the catch point. He can make things happen after the catch, even at his size and frame. He's got good movement skills. To me, he's clearly the best wide receiver in this class. He could be the guy Tet McMillan pushed all the way to be the 8th pick in the draft. If we have a top 10 wide receiver in this draft class, I find it really hard to be anybody but Jordan Tyson when the time comes for that 2026 NFL draft. KC Concepcion in his new home, 3 catches, 72 yards, and a touchdown. Jeremy Bernard out of Alabama. It wasn't Williams making the big plays in the Alabama pass game, even though they got the loss. It was Bernard, 8 catches, 146 yards. There's a reason why he's generating round 1, round 2 buzz. Field Yates had him in his round 1 mock draft. Todd McShay had a round 1 grade on him. I had a day 2. I had a round 1, late round 1, early round 2 day grade on him. He's in my top 6 wide receivers or so. But Bernard is a guy, I think stock is already going up. Really interested to see how he performs throughout this year. Carnell Tate, only 2 catches, 49 yards, and a touchdown, but he's just so steady. He's going to be one of those guys that's not going to be flashy. He's not going to have these great physical traits, but he just does everything right. I think he's going to be a high-end number 2 wide receiver in the NFL, go somewhere in the top 50 picks of the NFL draft. So we saw him, the big touchdown play, showing that body control, the ball skills, the ability to adjust. Impressive catch there for the touchdown. Jeremiah Smith was kept intact this week, and it was Tate with the big touchdown catch. Zachariah Branch, nice to see him making big plays. 3 catches, 95 yards, and a touchdown. So that big playability that Branch offers, that athleticism, speed, that instant acceleration, stop-start acceleration, the burst he has, nice to see him making some plays there to start the college football season for sure. Also nice to see back in the mix after the injury last year, end of the season. Deion Burks for Oklahoma had 7 catches, 88 yards, and a touchdown. So Burks is a guy who I think is going to be a prolific slot player for Oklahoma and could be one of those guys that could be taken in the round 3 or early round 4 for a team looking for a prolific slot receiver. And then I want to talk about Chris Bell because we talked about him on the wide receiver show. Nobody's as high on him as Dame Ruger, who had him as his number 2 wide receiver for the 2026 NFL draft. And he did talk about a lot of it was projection based. But this past week for Louisville, 5 catches, 63 yards. He's the kind of guy I'm going to be interested to keep checking in on because he isn't a household name right now. You didn't see him a lot atop of a lot of rankings. So he's going to be a fun guy to kind of keep track of to see if he can continue to elevate himself in the position to be a top 50 or even top 100 pick in the NFL draft. So there it is, guys. The prospects I kind of wanted to talk about from week 1 of the college football season in the first NFL draft report for this college football season. Again, like I said, every week their in-season shows are going to have multiple parts to it. NFL draft stock report for the 2026 NFL draft. If there's underclassmen, non-draft eligible prospects I want to talk about, there'll be a Devy slant, and then there'll be the NFL aspect of it. An NFL rookie report, checking in on all those 2025 rookies that we talked so much about last year. And then a quick dynasty fantasy report, just my quick thoughts on maybe a stock up, stock down from the different positions. If I can get 1 or 2 of each, I will. Or if I'm just focusing on a couple, but quick thoughts on stock up, stock down, sell, buy for those dynasty people out there as well. If you missed the previous podcast, I did put one out announcing that the 2026 Premium Notebooks were now available for purchase. Talked about what each of those notebooks had. If you've been a longtime listener but never purchased them, please consider purchasing them. They are the lifeblood of what we do here. Without the small amount of revenue that we bring in from them, we would not be able to continue to do what we do here at Saturday Sunday. Every dollar we make from those notebooks goes back into the product. It's only $9.99. You get access to all 3 notebooks. You get the rankings notebook, you get the scouting notebook, and the next April, you get the draft projections notebook. Any questions about that, you can listen to that previous podcast. You can reach out to me on Twitter. Fastest and easiest way to get there, just go to S2S Football, the number 2, football.com. Brings you right to the page. Go to the premium content tab, check out, and you can purchase it right there for $9.99. Tells you how to access it, the email, everything that you need to get access to them. If you've purchased it in the past, please consider purchasing it earlier this year. The earlier the sales come in, the better that helps us in a lot of different ways. So if you're somebody who knows you buy it usually next January or next March or next April, the month of the NFL draft, if possible, consider purchasing it maybe ahead of time this year, and it gives you access the entire year, and you can get a lot more use out of it if you purchase it now and have it for the entire college football season. I will be making updates in real time on a regular basis, which is why I put it in the Google platform. So you will see me in there making changes to my rankings, adding people to the scouting notebook, adjusting draft projections or developmental areas or how they win or what I might think their NFL role is. So $9.99. If you bought it in the past, please consider purchasing it even earlier this year. If you've been a long-time listener but never have purchased it, please consider purchasing it and helping us out there for $9.99. Like I said, it is the lifeblood of what keeps us going here, and we do try to put a lot of time and effort into it to give our takes on there. So, week 1, college football in the books, except for Bill Belichick's debut tonight. NFL season kicking off this week as well. We'll be back next week recapping all of week 2 of the college football season and breaking down what happened in week 1 of the NFL as well. So, on behalf of my sound tech engineer, David Nakano, and myself, thank you for joining us, and we look forward next time taking you from Saturday to Sunday.